Righto, you unload weapons. Today I'm going to teach you how to smoke a brisket, and it can be an offset, a charcoal, a gas smoker, or even the pellet. Today you and I are going to smoke the coveted brisket. It's cheap, it's cheerful, but has bags of flavour. Battle plug is on. First key step to a successful brisket cook is selection of the brisket. Cheers, Russ. It starts off the butcher doing the old man floppy test. If you got a lot of bend, a lot of give in the brisket, it's not going to tighten up towards the end of the cook. And the other thing you want to look for, like in this ebony black, is a nice thin, soft fat cap, because we don't want to waste all of that fat. Yes, tallow is great, but I'd rather have meat. Second last tip is a nice thick flat. That's obviously the opposite end from the point, being the thinner end. The more consistent the thickness is across the flat, the less waste there is. Lastly, within your budget, you want intramuscular fat. And all that striations of fat that runs through the brisket, that's going to render down and give you a better end result. Those small flecks of fat in between the muscle fibers, that's what you're looking for. Lastly, if you can find one with a nice uniform rectangle shape, that's half the battle. I'm using the rubs seen in my Zero to Barbecue Hero series. And in this episode of Just the Tip with AussieQ Barbecue, I'll do as much prep the day before because I'm lazier than a sloth with a hangover. But if you're cooking on the same day, this is the moment where you start preheating your smoker and you can do all the prep while that's preheating. To make life easier for you, throw some foil down. We can season and trim the brisket on that. With any kind of smoker, if you've got a second tray, put a piece of foil underneath. That'll catch a lot of the crap and you can just throw the foil out underneath. Less cleaning. Now onto prepping your wood or your charcoal. If you have a moisture meter like this, we're going to run for between 10 and 15%. And they'll give us some great smoking wood. Now, if you're running your charcoal or gas smoker, cherry wood like this usually runs a higher moisture content, but you should be good if you're buying the pre-packaged stuff from Bunno's, etc. My favourite cherry wood I like to run is from Natural Smoke in South Australia. As well as the cherry wood, I'm using Queensland Ironbark. Now, if you're running any kind of offset, I like to prep all the wood first, have that ready large, sticks down the bottom, and then the smaller kindling at the top. Now, if you're doing the snake method on the kettle, or even if you're using a bullet smoker, this is where I'll prep all the charcoal, have that ready to go as well. Now, if you like natural fire lighters, I've actually got part of the charcoal packet ripped up and twisted up and wrapped underneath, and you can douse that in a bit of olive oil and light her up. Righto, let's remove the franger from the brisket. Doesn't matter which side you start from, but if you are using a charcoal smoker, there's a good chance you want to have the fat facing towards the heat, and that'll just give it a little bit of shielding. But because we're not doing a comp trim, all I want to do is make a little bit more aerodynamic, makes the smoke roll it over a little bit better, you won't get burnt up bits. So if you have any bits hanging off, like this big dag right here, or if you have some really thin bits, you want to trim that back so you're nice, even, flat. Just remember the flat muscle is that flat piece that runs on the underside of the brisket, and it's on the thin end. This is a bloody great time where you can get yourself a snag and some onions from Bunno's. Right, remember, nothing crazy. We're just going to take off the bits that are hanging out. We're just going to take off the beef curtains. We can use these later to make snags. It's not going to go to waste. Once you're happy with the big thick end, then we're going to move down towards the flat end. And this one's a little bit thin, but otherwise not too bad. We're just going to give it a nice round edge, aerodynamic over the top. If there's any big daggy bits of fat, any silver skin, or if it's quite hard, it's not super soft underneath the touch, we're going to trim that off. My favourite way is just to skim off the top, just like that, and then just work your way down until you get to the meat side. Thinly shaved. Now, if this is your first time handling a bit of meat, don't get fucking too nervous. Just put your hand under, just treat it like you're shaving. And if you haven't shaved yet, like I said, nice thin layers, don't get too carried away. Then when you get right close to the meat, you might as well just stop there. Any hard chunks of fat like that, that is absolutely no way that's going to render down. Don't be shy with that. Get your knife straight in and get rid of it. The fat is also a perfect blend to make meat. There we go. There's the underside all trimmed up. Remember, that's the beauty of a backyard cook. It doesn't have to look too pretty, as long as it's got nice, clean lines, aerodynamic. And all that hard as you fat is all gone. Just to reiterate, don't have to get too crazy, don't stress too much. Prostate glove on. Time to flip it over to the top side. Same principle as bottom, just make sure those edges are nice and smooth. Big difference here, we're not getting as aggressive with the big fatties. As much as I know some of you like to. You want to aim for about 1/4 of an inch or about 1/2 centimetre of a fat cap across the top. That gives it a great mouthfeel and a little bit of the protection from the heat, in particular over the flat. If this is some of your first briskets and you're not too comfortable with feeling how the thickness, have a look at the edge, you can run your eye over it that way. The fat cap's fairly even on this one, so nothing too crazy. First step, we're going to remove his horn. Otherwise this is going to pop up like your morning glory, so we're just going to trim that straight off. Just shave it down, don't get too aggressive, in particular with this side, because we want to keep a nice fat cap on. Now, while you're trimming your fatty, the thing I do want to draw your attention to is the point end. Remember that end where you started off? It's got a nice point to it, it's the thicker end. If you've got a nice, really marble piece, you've got a bit of cash, you've got a bit of dosh in the bank, you can take all that fat off and just leave the fat to protect the flat itself, because obviously you've got a lot more intramuscular fat. The other key point I want to highlight, if in between the flat and the point of the decal, you've got some really hard fat, feel free to scallop that out a little bit. But if there's an absolute metric shit ton, my preferred method is actually cut that off once it's cooked. Right, she's certainly no Margot Robbie, but bloody fantastic for backyard barbecue. Now that I'm tighter than a fistful of arseholes, I want to point out we've got a lot of the meat trim on one side and we've separated the fat. We're going to put this into a pot and we can turn that into tallow, or we can even use that as a fat content to go with the sausages. We can use this to make burgers, snags, mince, you name it. Binder or to not to binder? Now, if you've seen my videos in the past, I've done some back-to-back testings with a binder and without, and from a dry piece of brisket to with a binder, it definitely saves about 10 to 15% of the rub spilling fucking all over the place. You know one wants to clean up an aisle 69. Now, it's not mandatory, but I'm using sriracha. You don't have to use binder, completely up to you. Whatever side you're gonna cook up, you're gonna do that last. One of the only times I'll let you rub your meat. Flip her over, do her on the back. Now for the seasoning, I'm going to use a mixture of the red and white meat rubs. In my previous video, you'll see that series pinned to my profile. Nice thin even coats. If you're a spray painter, you're all over it. From about 50-60 centimeters high, when you get a nice even coverage without it clumping up, because they're the bits that will burn first. Use your hand to guide the rub back in, especially on the sides. Remember, pat, don't rub. Save that for the bedroom. Then when you can only just see the ruby red through, hit it with your white meat rub. Nice even coverage straight over the top of that as well. A little bit heavier on the point end because it's obviously a thicker piece of meat. We want the seasoning to penetrate a little bit more. Now exactly the same with your show or presentation side, or the side that's going to go up, because now you're going to do a nice even coat and you're going to put your grubby little hands all over it. And if you haven't seasoned a large piece of meat before, like I said, you want to probably double the seasoning of the point end being the thicker end compared to the flat. And you should barely be able to see the ruby red, maybe a little bit towards the flat. Now, so you don't get relegated to the doghouse. Make sure you prep your camping fridge or your normal fridge. Throw some protection in it, because the last thing you want is your mystery misses to absolutely flog you if you spread seasoning from arsehole to breakfast. Now, of course, depending on your age, this is where you might treat yourself. Just don't have too many, because maybe you've got to get up bloody at Sparrow's Fart tomorrow to get that brisket going. Now, this is where Team Pellet's freaking laughing in your face, because they go, yeah, right, I'm going to just flick that thing on and go back to bed tomorrow morning.
Well, it's 4:40. Let's get stuck into our work.
Right, because it's still early as fuck. We don't want to wake the neighbours up, and we certainly don't want to wake up Mrs. Q. We can use tongs to transfer the charcoal and be quiet as fuck. When your pit's up to temp, 250 Fahrenheit, 120 Celsius, you're ready to bang on your meat. Now, if you're cooking with your offset, you want your thickest end to the hottest end. For a reverse flow offset like mine, that's going to be on the left side away from the firebox.
If you don't know where your hot spots are, place some bread on it and fire it up, and then look for the bits that burn first.
Remember all that beautiful beef fat? We're going to put that on the hot side, just with the handle available facing away, so it's a little bit easier to grab. We'll turn that into tallow. Now there's a couple of ways you can skin this cat. Firstly, get some wood near your firebox. We're going to preheat that. It's just easier to light up and it will pull out a little bit of that moisture, so be aware of that. You hear a lot about having super clean smoke. The reason is because you don't want that real acrid burnt taste. But I like to have, so I can just see, it's hard to hear, just a whisper of blue smoke coming out the top of the chimney. Now, if you've got a charcoal smoker, you've even got a big enough firebox, you can get some of your smaller splits or even some of your fruit wood. You can have it on the cooler part of your firebox, and that'll just give that a nice layering of smoke, in particular in the first 3 or 4 hours. Now, this next bit is probably his biggest question is, where you're going to get your first warm apple pie from as a teenager. But I'm here to fucking chill you out, and let's crack on with it. So, quick recap. You've done all your prep the night before. You've preheated your smoker. You've now banged on your brisket on whatever kind of cooker you've got. Now what the hell do you do? Do I sing tins? Do I mow the lawn? That is up to you. But what I like to do is just keep an eye on the smoker for at least the next 30 minutes, regardless if you're on a pellet, charcoal, offset, gas, etc. Just to make sure that the wood's doing exactly what you want it to do. You've got the right smoke levels. So if it's running too clean, like I said, you can add a little bit of wood, just a little bit of offset, just give it a little bit of some extra smoke or a smoke tube. In the case of you pellet grill legends, on everything but an offset, everything's running smoothly. This is where the old, if you're looking at ain't cooking, comes into play here. You want to leave this for a solid 3 to 4 hours. Don't need to touch it. There's nothing you need to do at that point in time. You can worry about if you want to spritz and all that sort of crap down the track. And a fantastic way to make some sides. A simple pickle, because the acidity cuts through that fat. Add a little bit of freshness, a little bit of crunch, and just that textural balance of flavour and that chemistry of the acidity that will play off in the brisket, especially if you need to watch your brisket intake, if you've got a bit of gout. Or you might be just using this opportunity to fire out the barbie, let some of that head noise out, and all you have to do is just concentrate on that barbecue for the next 8 to 12 hours. All the other crap that's going on in your life, piss it off. Or you could just sit back, relax, sink a tin and catch up on some YouTube. Just that subtle smell of cherry wood is absolutely amazing. It's like you can actually smell the sweetness of the cherry. It's ridiculous. Right, just to give you a bit of an idea where we're at, we've been going for about 3-4 hours at the moment. This is what it's looking like. As you can see, bark's just starting to develop. Doesn't pass the scratch test yet. It's still coming off under the nail, so we're not going to spritz it. As you can see, I've put a little bit of a foil up for a diffuser. That's just because I'm getting a little bit of a hot end. If you've got the same setup where you've got a hot end, you can either spin it around or you can just use a little bit of foil like I have to deflect the heat. Right, remember that tallow that we're making? We've pulled a piece out that's got a bit of meat on it. This would be a cheeky little pitmaster snack. And this is after about 4-hour mark. We can start to see it's starting to dry out. The bark's getting there. Probably another couple of hours before we think about spritzing. Right, so it's been another hour. Bark is getting there. As you can see, it's some of the fat's still coming through. Probably another hour or so, and then we'll start spritzing. Remember I mentioned that pitmaster snack from the tallow offcuts? How good does that look? Let's give it a red hot crack. Oh yeah, just pure beef and salt. Big head of beef. Right, it's been about another hour. The rub is passing the scratch test. This is the point where you want to spritz. You want to equalise that temperature on the top. You want to add a little bit of flavour to the bark. Now go ahead. For that tallow, chucks on top of a sealed container and just pour it straight through. And that's what you're left with. Beautiful golden liquid. Cheeky pitmaster snack. Throw some barbecue rub over that. Fantastic. Right, as you can see, colour and bark is looking pretty damn good. I'm very happy. It's at this point now a wrap. We'll punch the cooker, and this is where you can even transfer it to the oven because you're not going to get any more smoke in it, and then we can start resting. And for those of you that are really keen on the temperatures, we're sitting at about 76 Celsius or about 170 Fahrenheit. All right, just give it a quick spray just to help the paper stick together at the start. Just a quick hit of tallow across the top. Then to wrap him up, sides into the middle and fold from end to end. Nice and tight. Right, no dramas leaving it on the smoker, but feel free to bang it into the oven. We're going to hit about 96 Celsius, 205 Fahrenheit, but the main thing is we're going to probe after about 2 hours and see the resistance between the flat and the point.
Perfect time to drill those fatty little snacks if you haven't. Temp is creeping up to that 95, 205, so we're going to test in the flat and the point. When it has little resistance, we can rest in the oven at 60 Celsius for a few hours. If your oven doesn't go that low, shut off your smoker, smash it in there for a few hours, even an esky with a warm water bottle and a towel. Yes, I'm a child. Had to see if it jiggled like Kim K's rear diff. Cutting against the grain for the flat on a slight angle from the far end all the way into the middle, then cut it in half. If you have a little break in between serving, put it on the end so it doesn't oxidize. I am for about half the thickness of a thumb wrestler's thumb. Slice should have sufficient bend to hold its own weight. When you push down the flat, moisture should come up. Now I'm giving it a little hit with my secret mop sauce, but this is totally optional. Now onto the point. Rotate it 90 degrees, cut from the edge and work your way across. Because I'm a fatty, I prefer the point because the intramuscular fat is far more pronounced. Now bang that down in your neck. I'll clean up on hole 69.